Thank you, council. Welcome to our first official meeting of the new council. Thank the manager to read the notice of provision of the file and record the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The meeting is being live streamed and or recorded for on-demand viewing by council's website. Attendance at the meeting is to be taken as consent by a person with their image and or voice being webcast. All speakers should refrain from making any defamatory comments or releasing personal information about another individual without their consent. Council accepts no liability for any damage that may result from defamatory comments made by persons attending meetings. All liability will rest with the individual who made the comments. The meeting must not be recorded by other persons without prior written consent of the council in accordance with the council's code of meeting practice. Councillors and staff are obliged to declare conflicts of interest as required under the Local Government Act and council's adopted code of conduct. Councillors are reminded of their oath and their office whereby they have declared and affirmed that they will undertake the duties of the office of councillor in the best interests of the people of Wentworth Shire Council and the Wentworth people, and they will faithfully and impartially carry out the functions, powers, authorities and discretions vested in them under the Local Government Act or any other act to the best of their ability and judgment. Thank you.
Councillors, everyone please, I should be upstanding for the country of prayer. We want to pay my respect and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we are meeting. Pay my respect to elders both past, present and future. We are thankful for this day and pray for guidance to fulfil our duties. May we be challenged to give our best always. Amen. Councillors, I'll ask you to remain standing. Thank you and join me in a minute's silence for the loss of a great Shire man, great community bloke, Roy Lockie Harvey, who passed away sadly last Wednesday. Thank you. Thank you, councillors and the elderly staff. For the last meeting, with Lever, Councillor Rodder, secondly Councillor Later, any discussion? All in favour? Carried.
Okay, we're now going to cease our meeting and move into a public forum, and I guess we need I'll move that.
Second, Councillor Chris, all in favour? Thank you. And the purpose of moving into public forum is to give for the customers the opportunity to speak about item number 9.14. 9.14. That's right.
1 4 come up with this sort of form. There's no one to yeah, come on,
thank you, councillors, and thank you for the time for letting me present on behalf of my client. Firstly, congratulations to the councillors being elected, the new ones. I know the other ones, so the new ones, congratulations. The reason I wanted to present tonight, I thought that there is a recommendation, obviously, that council not waive the fees of our client in respect to this planning proposal for rezoning. However, I think that looking at it all in the process that's been detailed, I don't know whether, well, I don't believe the report's gone into enough detail, and I wasn't sure whether councillors have been fully informed, so I just wanted to be able to take this time to go through this whole proposal. So Mr. Pollis's land, in a quick background, is that it provides, through the land there's a drainage reserve of councils that goes through to the basin at the back. The easement that was on the property and where the pipe was actually located was two complete different locations. So therefore, council has now had to move that easement over. There's new infrastructure going in, which is creating all the Gold subdivisions and providing all stormwater, and council's gone in and they've constructed all new infrastructure. As part of that, council, yes, we've come to an agreement, and council, as you can see in there, they have compensated our client in respect to this. However, we think that it's better that we do compromise and council waive these fees, because through this whole process we compromised in respect to the compensation that our client got. It wasn't a substantial amount of money. However, we did have meetings with council officers, and we did what our client wanted, what council wanted. We reduced it quite a substantial amount of money. So we agreed to that because we wanted that to occur. On top of that, council did contribute to our office fees, our firm's fees. However, we set that at a particular amount, and that was it. So therefore, everyone knew what was going on. However, what's happened since then, if you look at the deed of agreement in this case, was that it was meant to go only for 30 days. It has now been over 12 months. In that time, we're still doing work for our client, which we're not charging, and at the same time we haven't come back to council and said, look, this is all extras. In addition to that, our client has been affected as well, as it hasn't been resolved. He's still out of pocket the other half that council has to give. That's still over 12 months as well, and we haven't come back to council and said, look, you know, we need to renegotiate, or we need to go through this whole process again and work out another compensation level. And so we think that given this proposal, and the end result of this rezoning will be that council can subdivide, we can give council that portion of land that they're in, rather than an easement, that you can actually own the land as part of the land being zoned and we subdivide. So the benefits are there for council at the end of the day, and as I said, because it has taken over 12 months, I think it's fair and just that council does waive the fees in this instance. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Any questions?
Roy, once this land's gone through, how many residential blocks will it be able to be subdivided into?
I think we worked out only about 3 or 4. It wasn't not a large amount. They're not going to be small lots, they're going to be large lots. It's only 3 or 4. But as part of that, sorry, Councillor Nicol, if I can just add, so what we because also where the easement, there's an existing house on the land, so that remains.
Yes.
There's an easement that council will have, and we'll subdivide that, and that'll be council's ownership. And then it's only 1 or 2.
Thank you.
Any further? Yeah. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
like to move that we go back into open council.
Second that, all in favour? Okay, item 6.1. Outstanding matters for previous meetings. Want to move the recommendation? Mover? Councillor Robert, Councillor Hayward, any discussion? Those in favour, it's noted. Anyone in favour? Carried. Okay, item 7.1, it's the mayoral report. It's my report, I'll move it. Second, Councillor Lechleiter. Any discussion? All those in favour? Councillors, as per the discussion in the briefing, there is an issue that is a fairly hot topic on the release of the water from the Mendy Lakes. I'd like to include this as a mayoral minute. I'll just read it to you. The council continues to pursue inquiry on behalf of the community with respect to the accuracy of the advice given to Water New South Wales regarding the reversal of the decision to increase releases from the Mendy Lakes 18,000 megalitres a day to 21,000 megalitres per day. That doesn't make a second. So, any further discussion? All those in favour? Carried. Okay, item 9.1 is the general manager's report. Again, seek a mover and a seconder, so we can show that discussion. For Councillor Evans, Councillor Chris. Comments?
I'd like to make a comment on the Broken Hill training, elected life training course. I mean, it's fantastic. Yeah, I think,
Thank you, I think I've spoken to just about everyone, and the feedback's been pretty similar, everyone enjoyed it, got a fair bit out of it, and it's a great thing. Councillor Nichols?
Yes, I thought the course was very well covered, and I thought the presenter also did a very good job, and everybody had the opportunity to discuss and understand what she was presenting. So thanks, council, for the availability of going.
Further discussion? All in favour? Carried. 9.2 is a statutory meeting item, the review of the external committees. So, we have had the opportunity to discuss with a few as to preferences and what they'd like to do. We've also included that, in my view particularly, and I think everyone's in agreement, there is no problem at all if we have more than one representative. If you're keen to be involved, that is fine.
Mr Mayor, the only one that I spoke to you about was the Barkindji Indigenous Land Use Agreement.
Actually,
and I-
discussed that this morning, Councillor Nichols, and fully agree and support your inclusion on that committee for those reasons.
Thank you very much.
Does anyone want to clarify any or?
I've just got a question. West Darling Arts seem to have dropped off the list. Is that correct?
Yeah, we made contact with Chief Executive Officer Kathy Farry up there, and their structure's actually changed where they have a skill-based board, I guess they'd say, and they will engage with us as need be. We're not invited to be part of their board or part of their engagement, so it's where that one's fallen off.
So we still make a contribution, I assume, to their operation.
Council, previous council resolved for, was a 3-year contribution plan. Yeah, so they still represent us, so she still comes down and meets with makers and other participants and, yeah, interested parties, so, it was just their board structure has changed where we can't have a representation on.
Councillor Hayward.
I'd just like to move that we open it for discussion. Need a seconder for that.
Councillor Hayward, second councillor Linklater. Jumping out of his apologies. Is there any other comments, councillor Linklater?
Yep, thanks, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to add myself as a alternate to the Australian Inland Botanic Gardens, in the event that councillor Lotta can't attend.
No problem, and if you want to attend the meeting as well. No problem. Right, we all in favour? Carry. Item 9.3 is policy review from the Office of the General Manager, and a lot of these policies are set and made with some variations that we're pretty in depth. We hope that some will have been covered in the process. Perhaps I should look for a mover for the recommendation. Councillor Chris, second councillor Nichols. And any discussion about any of them, are you moving as per the recommendation notice? Not like the general manager, but an amendment Kevin made to the policy.
They're all working documents, so, yeah.
And councillors would like to review and discuss.
This is adhering to our strict timeframe to have them all reviewed, 73 of them over the course of the next 6 months.
Any discussion?
Just got a question in regards to the point 2.0 of the delegations policy, the communications, media and public relations. So that policy is listed as being recommended for adoption. Does that fit in with the media statements policy, which is open for a period of 28 days?
Number of delegations policy, sorry.
2.0, it's page 32. Given that the other policy is open for 28 days, can we adopt this policy before that one?
Yeah, this one's an existing policy and the delegation schedule, in Schedule 2 of the delegations policy, that's as status quo, the way things are, and the adoption or the putting out on public exhibition as a draft won't change or implications on that other delegation.
Any other questions? Councillor Chris?
511 of the media policy,
Maybe page number 2.
page 56.
Yeah. The little asterisk.
Perhaps not here and now, but we're not meant to dissent council decisions, but we can disassociate themselves with us. I just see the contradiction there, and we could end up in an awkward position.
It's difficult to read those points of view in terms of, trying to form a united front as a council, but then if you disassociate with the decision made in the chamber tonight, then you get asked to make a comment, you've just got to make that clear.
It is a difficult one, you should never be an individual, be a councillor, you know, it's the press, but that's the policy. If you are going to say anything to, be very clear, it's your opinion and your own, and not the opinion of the other.
And it's very difficult because the media will in doing what their job, will look to then move you towards making a statement that brings the council to deal with you, which is contrary to someone else's view. So it's a difficult one, but looks like we're all aware of it, it's just difficult.
You just have to be aware of it, deal with it to the best of your ability if it arises.
Unless you want to exclude yourself, put the word not in there. Individual councils may not make statements.
Yeah, it's tempting because there can be part of many of
This is a
them.
templated
Yes,
policy from,
because elsewhere in my experience, it's been, see, the mayor and or the general manager or who make those comments and not councillors.
I think in
but that's-
general terms, the mayor and general manager, others,
we are the spokesman.
yeah, persons, this is specifically the example that Ken's giving you that if you happen to disagree with an opinion in the meeting and you get approached, you have a right to have your say, but as an individual. It's a council decision, is I would hope that most of the time that we would accept the majority, that's what we're a democracy. Majority rules, we support it. Councillor Nichols.
On page 123, under the conflicts of interest policy, at the front, is there some way we can take the must and put it in a into lighter case or something? Page 123.
You're not up to that item,
Oh, it's part of it. Okay, it's part of it, but that's okay. All right.
Are there any other?
If I can just say, Mr Mayor, that I think reading this whole document, I think is a good, pretty much a good roundup, or seeing the real document here, and although it's in draft form, it's after doing our course in going through that in Broken Hill. I think it just cements some of the real issues, and that's very good.
Yeah, I think that's good, it's very common, but
Yeah,
you have to experience the course and
Reinforces it.
it reinforces it, yeah.
Any other? All in favour? Carried. 9.4 is the local government special conference from 28th February to the 2nd March. Have a move for the recommendation, Councillor Haywood, second Councillor Cooper. Discussion, normally attended by the Mayor and the General Manager. We discussed it this morning,
It has a component of local government women associated with this committee, with this meeting. So, and they've lumped them in together, which is,
yeah.
Yeah.
I think the options were, it's on Wednesday. There's other things you can attend. And it's through the sites and
so I don't know that you'd want to rock up to a local government meeting.
we will attempt to improve the municipal board to look at various matters. Further discussion? Anyone comfortable with yourself and the chair attending?
It's important to take advantage of networking opportunities and participate.
as a mayor, voting delegate.
Mayor's voting delegate.
I'll just move that with the mayor and
I'll get you better move
okay.
discuss the recommendation and with that motion now, the GM would be the voting delegate. All in favour? Carried. Nine point five is a monthly investment report. Again, a mover for the recommendation. Councillor Chris, Councillor Linklater. Open for discussion and new councillors, we'll just take the time, it's pretty in-depth, a lot of this stuff, so if you've got questions, ask Councillor Rodder.
In regards to the doubtful debts, on page 72, are we able to get a bit more explanation on what that includes, please?
So at the end of each year, we're required by the accounting standards to review our outstanding debts and make an allowance for how much of that may not be able to be collected. So at the end of June last year, that figure was $124,000. Historically, this council's had it that amount will be covered as an internal restriction. Going forward, whether that still needs to be the case or not, it's open for discussion, and we can have that discussion at some stage in the future. But that's I suppose the background as to why it's sitting as an internal restriction at the moment.
Is it primarily made up of unpaid rates or?
It's purely just debts, so money that's owed to us by the works that we've done, or for grant money, and it's probably inflated at the moment because of the amount of grants and projects that we're doing. We've got invoices that we've invoiced departments for and are waiting for them to pay it, so our outstanding debts at the end of June were probably bigger than what they would normally be. Previously, we would just go through our outstanding debts and just review the debtors themselves and say, well, yeah, we'll get that. But they've actually basically now changed in the last couple of years where we have to do it as an average of our collections over a 4 or 5 year period. So and then it's based on the amount. So because our amount was high at the end of June because of the money that we're waiting to get paid for some of the projects that we're doing, that's inflated that figure slightly more. So I would argue that probably our true doubtful debts figure is probably less than half that.
So it's the term, doubtful in the month for that.
That's the accounting term for it, I suppose, Mr. Mayor, that based on how we have to treat it under the accounting standards, it could potentially be doubtful, but my assessment of where we stood at the end of June is that figure is probably higher than what it is in actual reality.
Thank you, Simon.
Quick question for the Director of Finance through the General Manager. I think there's $6 million worth of investments matured in the 12th month of last year. So typically what happens with those, are they just rolled over or are they sitting there and nothing?
No, so we have investments rolling over on a regular basis, probably about 2 or 3 a month, and then we try to time it. So when it rolls over, depending on how much money we've got in the bank, what commitments we've got coming up in the next couple of weeks around payments of accounts and stuff like that, we'll either call the investment back in because we need it for cash flow purposes, or we'll reinvest it for a future term, and it just depends on when we think we might need it, what the interest rate's doing at the time, where we haven't got a term deposit maturing. So if we've got a month where we haven't got one, we might put one in there just to give us a bit of security for that particular month.
Any others? All in favour? Carried. So 9.6 is the investment report, again a mover. Councillor Rodder, second Councillor Cooper. Any discussion? All in favour? finance report, in a second, again, thank you. Against Keith, second, Councillor Evan. Discussion. Councillor Nichols.
To the finance manager, do you see a problem in the fact that we're 3% down on last year's collection of rates at this stage? And the second question, probably won't be to you, but how can we have an incorrect reading of meters?
Because a lot of it's still done manually by hand, so if it's inputted incorrectly, then it's
Human error.
error.
Okay, and the 3%.
Yep, so if you go and have a look at the report for on page 87, you'll notice then that for December we were actually 62% compared to 59%, so there was a timing difference between when they, so then we would have had a few rates come in on the 1st of December or 2nd of December, which was technically after the end of the month, so.
I'm reading two lots of minutes at the same time.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions, Councillor
Just
Evan?
on page 86, just the overtime hours. Roads and engineering indoor, so that I presume that would be indoor staff.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are, with the number of projects and developments that are going on, and there's quite a number of projects in the lead up that have worked, and staff or contractors that are on those projects are working outside of our normal hours and on weekends, and there's a requirement for our staff for supervision and for approvals for their works to keep going and continue, and for confirmation of various things, whether that be advice for those staff, and that's primarily what will make up the indoor staff workload for that period of time.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I'm not mumbling me. Yeah, I just said it's nearly 200 hours. So,
All in favour? Carried. 9.8 is the December report. Move and second again, thanks, Councillor Keith. Hayward. Discussion. Probably give out one of the thing to Director Gunn was just the overtime again on roads. Thanks Ellen for the month, the result of rain, graders.
Yeah, so there's a number of factors there. So we are, sorry, which page are we referring to?
Page 90.
Page 9 for
Road.
yeah, so the roads one, so yeah, as you can see, the roads for RMS 181 and the roads for council 228. So there's a combination of repairs and maintenance work that have been undertaken, primarily all the road, the RMS related works relate to the work on the highway construction project on the Sturt Highway, but the remainder of the other work is and around all ongoing repairs and maintenance, and there has been a number of particular items and issues with regards to weather and that we've talked about before, and it's caused that. Also, there's been a number of staff down in the roads area, so there's a couple of other people that are having to do slightly extra work to cover off on a few of those particular issues.
Thank you. Any other questions? All in favour? Carried. 9.9 is the December quarterly budget review. Move to the recommendation, we've Councillor Chris, second Councillor Roller. Open for questions. Questions in relation to the review, I should say.
Page 92 there, the discussion of under matters under consideration for variations. I have a question for Simon on this, is it? And I suppose it refers to some of the stuff further on, but that 10 to 25% on variations. How do we manage our variations?
As far as project variations or budget variations
I suppose yes, it's the project's impact on the
on the budget,
so
where possible, we try to find savings from other projects where we create savings or projects which may not start for a particular period of time or may end up being deferred for various reasons. So that's all other areas where we come internally where we can find savings in the first instance. If we can't do that, then we have to come in that difference for additional funding to complete projects.
I do note in the conclusion, it's a double-edged sword where the operational variance is favourable and the capital variance is not so favourable. That's correct. So, thank you.
Any further discussion, Councillor Bowen?
Yes, question to Director of Finance. I'm also on page 92, the council total operating expenditure, the 31st of December. How are those figures made up? Do they include salaries?
Yep.
They do, okay.
Any others? All in favour? Carried. So 9.10. Program progress update. Application there, you're the mover. Right, second, Howard. Discussion from the review program. Probably the comment, the guy's total budget figure is $63.5 million. Being reflection of the amount of grant money
And
secured.
Yep, and we've got two significantly large projects in the Civic Centre and Benfield and Newby Road, which we budgeted to commence this year, so there's probably 14 or $15 million that is tied up in those two projects.
Comment, Mr Mayor, there are quite a number of items that have been there for a number of times, and I mean probably into years, 2 years. I'm particularly thinking about cemetery sheds, and they can't really be that hard to get, surely. Now, they're only minor figures of money, but so I can't understand why we can't knock over the small figure ones and get them out of our hair. I don't know who wants to comment, if anyone wants to comment.
Which page is that on? Sorry, Councillor.
Oh, well, you're looking at page 109. 109.
I have allocated resources, so cemetery sheds upgrades. We've had for at least 2 financial years, and we've done too much work, so I guess I'll answer Councillor Nichols and say that we've just got to review our projects and make sure we do allocate appropriate resources.
It's the same with shade shutters for Midway, and I mean, they'll die waiting for it to happen.
Pretty valid point, it's been one of yours for probably the last 2 years.
It's
A lot of these little things, like this getting not done, get them done. Any other comments? Councillor Lloyd.
Just in terms of the stalled projects, the Boothary Water Treatment Plant and reservoirs pending, completion of integrated water cycle management plans, is that the main,
That's the plan that
Yep.
prepared by Public Works.
Correct.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All in favour? Carried. 9.11, local roads and community infrastructure program. Policies, we have a meeting in a second to discuss. Look for a mover and a second, mover councillor Rose, second councillor Hayward, open for discussion and perhaps an explanation from the chair.
Any questions? Yes, I have,
Yeah, just the cost of Clooncarry aerodrome lights seems a fair amount of money. It did include a lot of extra facilities for planes to turn them on and stuff like that.
I might hand that over to Director Gunn.
The replacement for the Boothary light, yeah, it's a full replacement. The lights that are up there at the moment, the wiring is direct buried wiring, so it's not in conduit or anything like that. So that is a full upgrade to the current standard for lighting. It includes the backup, it also includes the conduit and there's some other proposed works for extra turnaround areas there. So that pricing is current pricing based on from our contractor that's provided all the work for stage 1, 2 and 3 for the Wentworth aerodrome, who was the best tenderer for that time. He's reviewed the aerodrome with regards to some other faults that we've had up there. So that pricing is real time accurate pricing, but that's the reason for the cost of it is because it is actually starting again and there's considerable maintenance faults that with direct buried wiring is just impossible to chase now.
So the setup there now is obsolete completely, really.
It's not obsolete, but it's beset with continued problems, and more so with particularly when we're getting continued wet weather that we're getting now. That's and that moisture in the ground is causing us maintenance faults that can't be pinned down to one particular area. They can be just anywhere within the whole airport.
So it's an important part of the community up there with that flying doctors and that being able to land at night time and stuff. So, yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? All in favour? Carried. 9.12 is a policy review, Department of Finance and Policy, recommendation there, move it please, councillor Mickey, second, is Chris. For discussion again.
Mr Mayor, this was just where I said, could we, on page 123, does the must have to be highlighted because you've got a little knot after it and people are perhaps not inclined to look at it. The disclosure must not reveal, so can it just go down to normal sort of print? Up the top of the page.
On page 123, the disclosure must not, you want those in?
Well, you either have the not big as well, or you have them both the same. It doesn't matter, but yeah, either one or the other. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So,
The further discussion again is probably a lot in there, just happy to break it in.
very good actually.
Yeah, happy to do it.
It's very good.
Happy, all in favour? Carried. Any more? item. Any discussion? Councillor Nichols.
Particularly, how many of these would we have outstanding at the moment? And I'm particularly thinking of the next item, which we're going to vote on, which we've already been told is 12 months. So can we have some sort of detail from the planning department of what we have to catch up on, so that we're not going to be behind the 8 ball as soon as we pass 914 or 913?
Carl?
Thank you. If I may start off and address this particular one very briefly. While the report outlines the factual matters of this order, it doesn't actually go to the heart of the issue. Just recently, our affiliation, LGSW, our body, basically have slammed this decision, this order, basically because they're saying that it's a very disappointing and disrespectful decision of the outgoing Minister of Planning to put this order on councils who are already working within a very limited and constrained planning system, and that basically it's a one-size-fits-all approach for all assessments and determinations. We all know that just it's absolutely ridiculous. It isn't the case. Not all determinations and our assessments are the same. The second part of this is that this order gives developers a planning guarantee of certain amounts of refunds on fees paid if we do not meet certain arbitrary timelines. The third main point of this that I'm very disappointed in is that it gives ministerial intervention powers if the government believes that council are not upholding their responsibilities. This is already all covered in the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, its regulations, the codes of practice, all the bits and pieces that we've got to follow anyway. This to me just reeks of a very low political move by the outgoing planning minister just to put more pressure on local governments across New South Wales just to deliver on something that he doesn't think they can deliver on.
I can understand that, but I mean, it's a ministerial decision.
Of course.
And we have to abide by it. And of course, I'm now thinking of where do we sit, because they can take your planning powers away from you, and that's...
So where do we sit? We have to abide by it for now until such time as our industry representative lobbies on our behalf to the new whatever portfolio holders holding it and see if they can have it rescinded or revoked or whatever it may be. But at this point in time, we have to review what we're doing and look at our timings and our bits and pieces that we're doing to try and meet these deadlines. The sad part for us and other local councils is we're at the mercy of the planning portal, we're at the mercy of other government agencies and timeframes already set down by the planning legislation and the regulations. So there's actually a conflict of legislative power here. In which one do we follow? Do we follow the regulations or do we follow the order?
Yeah, because if we go back to the planning stuff that we passed earlier, there were 3 or 4 in there that wouldn't have passed under this directive.
Yeah. Well, realistically, and my opinion aside, the reality of this order is basically it's forcing councils to make decisions in certain timeframes.
On the rush.
Yes.
So just to continue on with that, 180 days for the development application. So we had a lot of these taking 200 days. Should we make it so 100 days?
Not at that time, no. This order only came out in November last year.
But that will be the rules.
That was what's right.
That will be the rules.
Well, that's the expectation of this order. It's not the rule of the law, the legislation, it's the expectation of the minister. And that's the difference that we're dealing with.
So we have to deal with it.
Correct.
Thank you. Any other debate on it? All in favour? Carried. So 9.14 is the request for the planning proposal. We have a recommendation there, and the second to discuss it. Councillor Ryan, Councillor Hayward. Any discussion?
Any comment? I had to ask a question on the previous amount paid for the
Compensation.
that was paid previous in compensation. We paid a previous amount in compensation.
As per the deed, you mean?
Well, for the one that wasn't successful, the one that's in there that we've had to go around. The stormwater that we've already got in there. Yeah, it says 30,000, there's a 30,000 approximate cost here. This is for the ongoing one that we're currently doing. This is for the new one. Did we pay compensation on the previous, yeah,
When it was first created, way back when, is that when you talked?
yes, yeah.
Oh, sorry, councillor, I'll have to get it back and really.
Probably would be just payment, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Oh. Yeah.
Any discussion at all on it? Or questions, comments?
So just by way of clarification, we're talking about, I'll put this to the general manager, we're talking about two different issues. One is a fee that any developer will have to pay for a rezoning proposal. And the second is compensation and so on, that's been already agreed to under a deed that we've been presented.
That's my interpretation along those lines. So construction agreements have been put in place and appropriate compensation. We've relocated the easement to where the pipeline was in the incorrect location previously. Now there's the desire, I understand, to rezone that land, for which, dare I say, if I was to rezone land, or you were to rezone land, or anyone's to rezone land, there's an appropriate fee within our fees and charges structure to accommodate it.
Yep, as per the information here, to compensate for the time taken to process that rezoning.
Through the Mayor, is it appropriate to have some further comment from Mr Costa on this matter?
Fine, if you've got something further to add.
If I may, thank you, councillor.
Absolutely.
Just to sort of, just to probably get a clarification, because I think councillors are getting sort of confused. The whole matter is the $30,000 referred to in there isn't compensation. My client did not receive $30,000. Okay, that is the whole process in respect to the creation of the easement and the infrastructure that council has put through my client's land for development, not on his land, but for the residential to the south of that. Now, out of that, I can say there's a deed of agreements. I don't know if I'm able to say in public what portion his was, but it's nowhere near that amount. But there is a fee, yes, in respect to when you lodge an application for a planning proposal to rezone land. In this instance, and I understand that, and as a consultant, we accept that and we understand what that fee is. In this instance, we requested the waiver for the two main reasons, and that is that by the rezoning, council benefits as well from it. It's not just a developer turn around saying, "I'll rezone land, thank you very much." Council will get land out of this for nothing. And the second thing is that there was the deed of agreement that our client has been very lenient with council for 12, that agreement was for 12 months, and he was to receive a certain amount of money every day for 30 days. Now, that has now been going on for 12 months. So if we turned around, if we actually said to council, if you're in breach of this deed, and the fees associated every day would be probably at least 3 to 4 times the amount that we've requested a waiver. So that's why we're requesting, it's fair and just in this instance, to waiver that fee that would benefit everybody and would actually benefit council financially.
It does say December 2020, and if you look at page 7 in the pink, it tells you the figure of the fee that's to be paid.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay, so.
Thanks. Roy, any other questions? Any other questions at all? Put it to the vote, those in favour? Carried.
Division, is there any?
We've got a division, so those in favour, hand up please.
All those in favour? All in favour of the ordinance.
Right, on 5, I'll call on the deputy mayor, and come up here and take the chair, and we'll declare
Sorry, I know I'm saying, I was asked a question, so council voted not to waive the fee, correct?
as per the recommendation earlier.
That's right.
Recommendation was council to refuse to waive the early fee amendment fee off. Thanks. Tyler?
Jesse Stork.
Okay, thank you. Councillors will now deal with item 9.15, which is the Wentworth Local Environmental Plan 2011 planning proposal to rezone part of block 1, DP 1193874, Kelso Station, Carey Road, Wentworth. I have a mover, Councillor Crisp, seconder, Councillor Cooper. Is there any discussion?
I'm going to speak in favour of the recommendation. I think that with the success of what I see as the Cook subdivision, this looks to me to be a logical extension of that, and will continue Wentworth's growth in a corridor which appears to be in demand.
Certainly is.
Thank you, Councillor Crisp. Any further discussion?
I'd just further that by saying I think there's plenty of information there. Certainly we should continue to support it. I think we need to be cognizant of what implications there are in terms of having this proposal take its course to a positive end. So we do have to be very careful that we cover all bases along the way, and be supported by our experts that we have around us to make sure that it has a good positive end.
Thanks, Councillor Evans. Is there somebody? No? Any further discussion? Put it to the vote. All those in favour? Councillors carried.
Not only staff. Planning decision.
So call for a division. All those in favour? Unanimous, carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, there's a lot of challenges ahead for that one. A lot of challenges ahead for the future. We can support them.
Okay, item 9.16 is a reclassification of land to operational, recommendation to mover, councillor Nichols, second, councillor Beaumont. Discussion. All those in favour? Carried. Item 9.17 is the November delegation authorities. Mover for the recommendation, councillor Waverton, councillor Rodder. Any discussion? All in favour? Carried. Division, all in favour? Item 9.18 is the December delegated authority approvals. Discussion. I made a move in second to something, councillor Rodder and Linklater. Any discussion? Just comment if I can, Mr. Carl, on the development on Jindalee Road. Obviously that's something that can be done under delegated authority, will neighbours etc. get notified in that process? Correct. Thank you. All in favour? Carried. Division again, hands up. Thank you. 9.19. Report update. Recommendation there, move it please. Councillor Rodder, councillor Beaumont, seconder. Open to debate.
Questions, Mr Mayor?
Councillor Nichols.
Doing, on page 313, the sewer rationalisation scheme in Dearden, says here that we've been waiting since December 2020. We're running out of time for things to be covered. Do we need to get legal advice with this?
Yeah.
Sorry, just your question with
Well, it's sewer rationalisation scheme in Dearden.
yes.
The things that are happening, there's been no time frame's been done. It's been waiting since December 2020, and it's got a defect liability period. It's run out before it's even done. Do we need to have legal advice to try and push this?
The replacement of the air valves has already been arranged with the current contractor. The review of environmental factors and stuff for the EPA licence ongoing. The date for essential energy for the installation of the new meter. All those things are already they're already in training in place. So I don't foresee that there's going to be an issue, even though technically the defect liability period sort of runs out through the 22nd of January, essentially for the contracted works, whereas a couple of the other things with regards to the essential energy upgrade and the issue with the lagoons are items of ongoing nature with regards to the whole scheme, but not necessarily related directly to what was the original contract for all the installation of the scheme. So probably a little bit misleading there.
Okay. And a further one on the astronomy park, that was a grant that was given to us. At this stage we're waiting for consultants to develop a concept plan. Are we going to have to get an extension on this grant, because this has been going on for 12 months as well?
We don't believe so, councillor, because it's, I think that grant is got by the end of December this year.
Yeah.
Got till Christmas this year.
This year. Thank you.
Councillor Hayward.
So Mr Gunn, this one, the Pooncarie Menindee Road with all the rain and stuff, is that gonna be delayed? Or is it?
Won't delay it. Essentially, the timeframe for our works, is, the design's pretty much been completed, the survey's been engaged, so our surveying and set out will start happening in February, as will our, initial, identification and winning of materials for the project and the, numerous water access points. At the moment, no, don't foresee any issue with regards to that. As works on ground, when the first site gets turned, I suppose with the earth moving machinery is not expected until the end of March.
And we don't have any flood ground anyway on that.
There's water affected areas, but not flood ground, and that part of the first up works is the installation and the extension of culvert crossings and the reshaping and building up of the sub-base layer of the road. And essentially we're primarily staying on the same alignment. It's what's already there, which reduces our workload considerably and our known factors with regards to drainage.
Thank you.
It'll be an end of March start.
It'll be, at this particular stage, it'll be an end of March start, subject to our finalisation of winning our material and the delivery of our pipe culverts, which there are some issues at the moment which most construction people are experiencing with delivery of culvert materials, but we can work around that to a certain extent.
We've got a rough time frame.
The whole project is expected to be completed by November this year. So it's 26 and a half months.
Yes, the
Just a question to Director Engineering. In relation to the Wentworth Showgrounds Tower and shade structure, it's shade structure listed to be commenced in January and the tower in February. Is that still on track and roughly?
I spoke to the project officer before and they expect to start next week. Yeah. So there were a couple, at the time of writing this report, it was accurate and they've had a slight delay for whatever reason, so they expect to be on site next week to commence. They had, and that's with the footings and the details with regards to the site.
And if I could just add to that, sorry, in relation to the running rail, is how far off is that?
Look, I'd have to take that question on notice, but I know that that's the discussion and the siting of both those particular structures have been in consultation with the club and the representatives from to make sure that location was correct.
Running rail, what you've approved today is still going to go through an approval process through the funding body.
Yeah.
So the commencement obviously will be striving to have it done before first Tuesday in November. That's about as much as we're given a year to at this point.
Yeah, fair enough.
That's all right.
A couple of questions. The Wentworth Bowling Green, so where are we at with the preparation for the synthetic turf and an ETA on the completion of that project?
I think I'll go out.
Sorry?
It'll be later this week and finish in 10 days. It already been soon later this morning.
Too late.
So I think in regards to the contractor is set to return, as I said, the second week of February to come take the synthetic turf lap. So, yeah. And so the surface preparation was completed prior to Christmas. Before they do that, they will no doubt iron out any little imperfections before they lay the tap.
The question is in regards to the nature play area. The Flying Fox structure has exhibited major issues. What's the current status of that?
The current status of that is discussions between the contractor. We're holding payment on part of that project with regards to DAX essential failure of the footing structure on the Flying Fox. So discussions have been had with the particular contractor as to his return date to undertake all the necessary repairs on that. So ongoing.
A local contractor?
Not a local contractor, an interstate contractor. Expected within the coming fortnight though for him to be back from my last information across from the engineering manager. With regards to that.
What would you like to ask?
Considering the number of projects that have been delayed, my question is primarily one of the difficulties that we're facing, that we're utilising a high number of outside of the region contractors, which has created difficulties in regards to the completion of some of these projects?
No, I suppose we could view it two ways. That particular project would have always been done with an outside contractor. Whether that would be local or outside of the area, probably with that particular project, maybe outside of the area. But given the nature of the design and the installation of playgrounds, there's not, to my knowledge, not a lot of local specialist contractors that deal in that particular situation. So, but there is a mix of outside contractors. We've had outside contractors for major projects like the lighting component of the airport, which has gone fine. This particular project, there was particular issues with this contractor. It's caused delays and essentially we're holding money on the die, so it's trying to get it across the line.
So I think from a ratepayer perspective, there is some dissatisfaction with the completion rate of some projects. So just trying to highlight that through this forum and see if there's room for improvement in the processes or that so that we can be seen to be making some progress.
Sure, I take the point. Obviously, the last 12 months, if I might add, we've had some difficulties.
Yes.
Either contracts being able to access the area, even that are not too far away from our area, and the interstate people being able to get here. The other factors, like we have experienced even with our own projects, is the contractor's been able to get here but hasn't been able to get his materials. So they're not using them as excuses, I suppose, but they're factors that have had pushed out a number of particular projects, and then they've impeded other projects that have, if that hadn't have happened, I suppose their normal sequence would have gone through. So, and you're correct, there are a number of projects on the go, and we're introducing new staff and stuff into our particular area as well. So they're all a combination of factors that have contributed to this, and conversely we could have gone with a completely different contractor, and sometimes that is a little bit of luck of the draw, especially in some projects that are of one-off type nature that we haven't used before. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All in favour? Carried. 9.20. Redevelopment of the Shire Civic Centre project, an update. There is a recommendation there with Councillor Hayles and Councillor Cooper. Open for discussion there in the body session.
Just a quick one.
Yes.
Mr Mayor, just on the $900,000 funding amount, since these reports were printed, is there any update on the timing of that announcement? Suggested here that it's delayed to early 22.
That's the current state of play, I'm sorry.
Nothing's changed.
Nothing's
Still
changed.
early 22, unfortunately. Any others? In the favour? Carried. Number 10, notice of motions, which says we notice, we are in the table, councillor Nichols.
Seeing as we have $10.5 million in the sewage fund,
Water fund.
well, sewage fund, replacement fund, is it possible for us to look at the cost of a tower for the southern end of the Shire? The water fund I'm talking about, the water fund, and there's an associated cost to have that because we've got water problems in the Gol area, and also to have a fairly strict look at the infrastructure in Wentworth itself and see what needs to happen, because I can't see much sense in having $10.5 million sitting in a fund when everybody's complaining down that end with no water, and people up this end are complaining again with no water. So I think it's time we had a major.
Couldn't agree more, and I think it's one of the things that we have been harping about, that we have been waiting for this public works report for some time, Mr. Gannon, when it was going to be October and February, so.
Some commentary on that, so with regards to the Baronga Golgol in the Shire, whilst the strategic plan and the assessment is well on the way for delivery, we have highlighted as a separable and urgent matter with regards to the water supply issues, pressure issues in Golgol as to be brought forward, so that we're not waiting for the whole plan to come back to us as a whole. We've asked for that to be looked at upfront as I suppose more urgent issue, given the current problems that we're having over there. So public works engineering team and advisory that are undertaking all that information for us are looking at that now. So we've had numerous discussions with them. We've sent over detailed scope of further information with regards to the issues. We've already identified a number of what we believe are potential things for them to look at and consider, so that was also well underway. With regards to the Wentworth program, we haven't necessarily looked at that as apart from a couple of particularly the water treatment plant side of stuff, which we already knew was an issue and had highlighted that in the scoping for the people to look at in their assessment. But we have brought forward the Golgol Baronga, particularly the Golgol issue.
Look, I think it's time we looked at Wentworth as well, because the water pressure in Wentworth is hopeless, and I don't know whether we still flush the pipes. They used to flush the pipes and they used to flush down the end of Adam Street. The last time that happened was when someone complained about the smell in the water, and that's probably 2.5 years ago. So where we're flushing, whether the water won't go through the pipes or not, I don't know, but the pressure in Wentworth is shocking, and I don't know whether it's because it's earthenware pipes and we need to upgrade or look at those pipes that we're having a problem with.
I'll be keen to take on information. We currently don't have any outstanding customer requests at the moment, but I'm more than happy to take on any particular information that you might have that we can direct our staff to have a look at, and I'll happily follow up on those particular issues if they're a localised matter, because so it's not the feedback and the information that I have at the moment. I have quite a lot with Golgol Baronga and their specifically known issues.
I know one group can get 12 complaints from one, I've only got to say, and you'll have 12 complaints.
But as I said, we have nothing, and there's nothing that would come through to us apart from breakages or normal maintenance related issues.
Thank you, that's all I have.
So that scope of works provides for the whole district that includes all towns.
Yes.
One of the things that we learned and we spoke about 4 or 5 years ago was that tower for East Gold Island, just mentioned. And the Riverbend pumping station, only had a design to do Riverbend Estate, we're trying to.
That's exactly the issue that we had highlighted to them as a separable issue, given that we had a pump 1 pump down and then 2 pumps down for a little bit over around the Christmas period where we had significant pressure and flow losses. We've got the pumps been since fixed, but those we've provided as much detailed and up-to-date information with regards to existing houses, the planning, the future, the issues, the options, and what's there for those guys to look at the moment. So, yeah, we have funds there, but yeah, we've got to get from the point of that scope for them to, and probably those guys to come up with best case scenario and a recommendation that's going to suit, recommendation 1, recommendation 2 that says this is going to work and this is what we should be putting in, and then we can take that straight into design and potentially tendering.
And we're still expecting to see that February or
Well, the last discussion point is February for that. It might go, I don't know, it might go out again, and I'm happy to do a follow-up and provide some further information.
Councillor Chris.
I think that if it is not delivered in February, I think we should escalate it by actions between Mayor and General Manager to go to engage at that higher level to get them moving. Now, I know these are semi-autonomous or independent authority or corporation, but they will be responsible still, I presume, to a minister. And might well use your time at the local government conference to put some pressure on, and when times come to shake the tree and get something out of these guys. Otherwise, we won't get it done in a reasonable time for the ratepayers.
So, just follow up on that. How long? I know I've been arguing on the infrastructure out there for quite some time. How long have Public Works been on the scope of works project?
Probably 6-7 months.
So,
by the time that was finalised and then keep in mind we lost time for them being able to, although there was an exchange of huge amount of information that kept them ticking along, but the restrictions on travel were such that it impeded them getting here until where I think it was November when they come over and did their week or 10 days on site to get the rest of the information. That has caused
I'd certainly agree with Councillor Chris. Mr Mayor, that we need to make it happen now. It's I think it's a critical issue, and water is a critical issue, and the redundancy I think is nil over there, which concerns me. We have pumps down and we don't have any storage there, and we have a treatment plant that can't be supplied if the pumps stop. So it's pretty urgent stuff.
Councillor Ryan.
I've just got a really little one.
Yeah.
Mr Mayor. So the event that was held at the junction on Australia Day evening, although not particularly well attended by the general public, I'd like to say it was actually a really good event with quality music, but there was some issues in regards to the power infrastructure within that park. So my understanding was that there's been a recent upgrade, is that correct, down there?
power upgrade in there, and I was surprised to see the email from the event organiser or coordinator that it was only 10 to 3 before we got power in, so I was disappointed myself in terms of I don't know, but since I've been back, I don't know the reasons why, but there was a power upgrade around it, which is, we thought was technologically advanced in terms of putting additional power outlets in it, so, yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know the reason why.
Is it possible to have maybe Director Gunn have a look at that to see if we can rectify the problem for future events in that space? The other quick comment in regards to that event, I'm not sure where the direction came from, but the road was closed off into the park area, which meant that people, the parking for the junction precinct was blocked off from the general public, which made it extremely difficult for people to walk in hot conditions to that facility. Is there a rationale, or do we know who made that decision? The road closure signs were actually moved by, I presume, a disgruntled patron to the event. Do we need to have that area blocked off for such an event in that space?
From my memory, that there was an assessment done based on traffic management versus the conflicts of pedestrians and whatever else that was deemed more appropriate. The expectation was there was going to be a higher traffic load and there was going to be a bigger conflict than what it's in hindsight turned out to be. So the idea was that that space would have been crowd-based or food vans or whatever the case may be, and it sought the opportunity of a larger crowd. There was a risk assessment done on certain level of traffic and the conflict. So that's pretty much it. Was an internal assessment done by us as officers to do.
If I could just add to that, sorry, Mr. Mayor, if I can just say a couple of words on that, on the power. And I was down there. I just wandered down for a quick look, and it was pretty quiet. But the contractor did grab me and mentioned about the power situation, and also probably just a couple of points of interest were bollards put down there. The short bollards. Jeff, if you can see what I'm talking about, the short bollards down there are the ones I think that they put down the riverfront as well, and they've got a 3-phase plug in them. They're quite low, and there's only 2 in the whole area. So from there, the distribution boxes, which are provided by council, sit on the ground alongside those. But I see those as being fairly vulnerable in the water coming, if there is a high or a rise in the river. It's going to go across them pretty quickly. So it might be appropriate to raise them up a bit so they're not as vulnerable to the rise in the river. But I'll
Take a question on notice.
Yeah.
Yes,
Mr. Mayor, couple of points. I think the event potentially could be terrific, perhaps with a bit more publication and advertising and that sort of thing. I did attend for about 3 hours, and it was a great environment. It was a warm day, but there's enough shade down there to sort of huddle under trees and that sort of thing. I think potentially it could be good. As you know, I've received at least one letter of complaint from a local business person in relation to the vendors that were operating down there, all being from out of town, and why weren't local vendors given the opportunity to participate. One of the pubs has suggested that they could have provided drinks. With the van, Jade Millard was there with her van doing coffee, which is great. But there was opportunity for a Rotary Club or someone else to do barbecues and that sort of thing.
We've actually got a table for the mayor's meeting in the morning. We're going to go through it, probably just investigate a bit of the background.
Yeah.
The other one in relation to advertising, the council's contributed quite a bit.
Yeah, but I think we need to look at supporting our local businesses a bit more. I mean, even the ski club, the ski race the weekend before, they were all vendors from Mildura. When we had businesses in town that could have provided.
We probably need to hear from them too as to what they want to do.
Sorry.
We need to hear from those businesses to the input they might be having these events.
Yeah, but I think we have the responsibility to go to them.
I think so, but we do.
I just question the we, so there's been a clear message coming out through our community consultation that we need to communicate better. So the ski race was held by basically the Jura Ski Club, and they've come out here and they've set up the event, and they've, with very minimal, to the point of some of our shop owners didn't even know the race was on.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of communication has got to be better on all fronts. An event organiser comes to town for a pretty significant championship race, in the only one other Two Rivers ski race, and our town didn't know about it.
In the past, it was
So-
passed all over the telly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, look, yes, and a lot of that's come about through COVID, obviously, but do we provide sponsorship to that event? We do. So we couldn't really say we didn't know about it when we're providing sponsorship.
No, I wasn't saying we didn't know about it, I'm saying that the town didn't know about it. Where was the trigger of our communication should have delivered better, or their communication should have been delivered better, or WRTI should have known about it, or, you know,
Well, we
name
didn't.
any level of blame
We
game.
didn't.
Yeah,
Well, I did because I read it in the paper, I think, the week before, but
I think we can generally badge all that to say there's got to be better communication of events from everyone.
yeah. And if I could just add
We now
to,
have someone probably in that position that can take.
well, I guess if we've got a manager tourism now, I mean, that's the obvious position or person to link into that. If we're providing sponsorship, and I don't know the figure, do we put any conditions on that sponsorship in terms of utilising local businesses or promoting local businesses? You know, promoting the local motels to their race teams, etc. To, you know, book locally.
Yeah, no, the answer to your question is no. It got to the point of, is the event on, is the sponsorship still available by the fact of a previous council resolution? Yes, we didn't pay that money until the week off or their event, based on we didn't know whether COVID was going to stop it or whatever the case may be. So in terms of cramming everything into the one, no, there was no conditions put on it. Basically, a tax invoice was presented based on what had happened in the previous council resolution. But there's a lot of learnings from this. There is no doubt about it. All the sentiments around here are good, valuable contributions. We're just going to bring it all together and make it happen.
It was noted that the event wasn't advertised on the Wet West Shire Council Facebook page. I think we need to work into the media policy further links between Experience Wentworth, which is the visitor information. Wentworth Regional Tourism haven't even posted since October last year. So we all need to get better at sharing that information to the community. There was a significant comment on social media in regards to local people as well as businesses not being aware of that event. So I think we definitely have got some work to do in that regard. But in reference to the question about Rotary doing the barbecue down at the event, probably lucky for Rotary they didn't, because my understanding is that the main food provider at that event, it came at significant cost to be there. So probably lucky it didn't come out of local pockets.
Yeah, but my comment is of a general nature in that where we're hosting events, we should.
I agree with the sentiment, but in this particular circumstance, probably lucky they didn't.
Yeah.
Question came around the word hosting. We didn't host.
Oh, well.
An event come to town in our community, and we were.
Okay, bad choice.
Yeah, I sort of, that's the reason I'm enjoying the discussion. I mean, I'll sponsor a few things at a time, and it's normally better than just when you run the event, it's a race club or something, they're supposed to be promoting that. In this case, it's supposed to be promoting council, the towns.
So,
Perhaps we really need to get at the nuts, guts of that and be saying, well, this is what we want as part of our sponsorship.
Absolutely.
You know, we want to include this.
That's a really good discussion.
Got to be a return on investment.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think, you know, with COVID and everything that's happened, those people mostly didn't know whether the event was going to happen.
And I
We're
think-
all like, you talk about the junction down there with the Australia Day. We had a great Australia Day at the rowing club launch here. It was very successful. And in council, we said that we were going to promote Baronga one year, Wentworth the next year with the ambassadors. So we had a plan, but COVID's really taken the.
As Ken's just said, that sort of organised invoice the week off because I didn't know the event was on, and it has made it difficult. But I think we're all right too. We've got to get better at it.
Yep.
I think if I lose 3 stone, we'll blame COVID. I can remember we've promoted and we've done the Christmas party for a lot of years. Went ahead this year and was very, very successful. However, as is usual, very few of our local businesses chose to open. And that's one of those things, and I think the local businesses also must play their part, because it's one of those things that there were a lot of people around that night, but very, very few of those businesses were open. So we need to promote, but the businesses, and you come into this place on a Sunday and try to get a cup of coffee Sunday morning.
So most recently, Mr. Mayor, you may be aware there was a Victorian long course swimming championship held in Mildura. I encouraged businesses on this side of the river to jump on board that opportunity to bring people to this side of the river. So I'd like to congratulate the Wentworth Military Collection on offering and providing vouchers for those 3,000 odd people who came to town, and I know the take up for that was reasonably good. So sometimes we need to think outside of the square, and congratulations to those guys for jumping on that opportunity to bring people over here. And even though they may not have necessarily all had the opportunity to visit that facility during that 3-day carnival, hopefully they will come back. But it's disappointing that was the only business on this side of the river that I could get any buy-in out of.
Yeah. Right, Councillor Hayward.
Question, we've noticed Coral Boat Ramp was done a fair long time ago. It was stuffed up, it's got an angle on it. Council committed, I think, 35 grand or around that figure to fix it, and it still hasn't been done. And I think I seen a boat the other day back in, and it looks like there's a big washout at the end of it because he fell off the end of the ramp. So it's a bit dangerous. You know, with a bit high river now, it should be better, but it's not. And it's sloped one way. The contractor was paid for, and the job wasn't checked out before he left. And we've put that extra money there, but nothing's been done. And I think the longer it goes, the dearer it's going to get to fix it.
I'll be able to answer that question, Councillor. We have already been in contact with the contractor who has the divers to come back at just after Easter to do that work. He can't get his time in between because he's got a backup of other jobs that he's had. He's South Australian based. Obviously, with the high river and the flow at that particular point, he would have been unable to have the divers and stuff do that particular project. We certainly have not forgotten about it, and we are constantly in contact with that guy to lock him into place and have him there for that time. If we obviously, even though the boat ramp is not ideal, people can still access it with where there is difficulty, but it's still usable at the moment. If we had pulled it out at this particular point in time through to Easter time, I think that would have caused significant disruption to everyone, because it would have been out of action for at least a 2 to 3 week period because of the type of work that has to be done there. So we are definitely aware of it.
Yep.
And definitely onto the contractor to come and rectify.
Very good.
Okay.
Councillor Whitmire.
Nothing in particular, but just to add to Sue's original question, I've put this in another form, but I'll put it in this forum this evening, is that with the Public Works report, I think there's an expectation that obviously it deals with the overall water system, delivery and stormwater. However, it goes without saying there's an expectation that there is some degree of short-term solutions in addition to the long-term solutions. But it's probably more of a statement than a question because I've already asked that.
Well, yeah, I think the comment before the question needs to go on and get it on the table, so we can have a look at it.
We need to keep patching things up. We don't need to keep patching things up, we need to get a system that's going to function and work correctly.
No issue. Councillor Chris, Councillor Cooper. No issues. Councillor Beaumont.
The only thing I'd ask is, the letters that I've had a few letters come to me from local businesses, as I mentioned earlier, which I've forwarded on or they've sent in directly. Are they responded to in writing? They will be. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Evans. Good up here. Alright, so we move on to 11, confidential, in the close.
You want me
In the close.
Councillor Evans, you can do that.
I can do it if you like.
There you go.
Okay, the recommendation is that council adjourns into closed session, recording of the meeting be suspended and members of the press and public be excluded from the closed session, that access to correspondence and reports relating to the items considered during the course of the closed session be withheld unless declassified by separate resolution.
Thank you, councillor. Seconder.
Everybody. All in favour?
Councillor second, Councillor Chris, all in favour? Carried.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to report that during the close of business of council, item 12.1, the planned replacement approval of tender for replacement of Plant 41, 110 horsepower tractor, that council resolved to accept the tender from Agtech Machinery for the supply of one Massey Ferguson F5711S for the sum of $149,404.20, including GST, and accept the trade-in price of $64,750, including GST, for the council-owned John Deere four-wheel drive tractor, having a total changeover price of $84,654.20. In relation to item 12.2, the Wentworth Shire Civic Centre redevelopment stage 1 courtyard, that council has resolved that in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government General Regulations, section 178(1)A, accepts the tender from CPM Building Contractors Proprietary Limited to carry out the construction of the Wentworth Civic Centre courtyard for contract PT 2122/05 for the amount of $647,148 inclusive of GST, and authorises the Mayor and General Manager to sign the contract documentation and affix the council seal. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, councillors. Concludes our meeting, our first one of meeting, and I thank you for your attendance and input, and look forward to our workshop on the 9th, and then our next council vote on the 6th. And declare the meeting